And then the monetary printing, without people realizing, people think at first, and I think most people still think today, that the money goes into the banks, it gets lent out, and assets go up because people buy assets. It's simply not true. If you look at the volume of the S&P, it hasn't risen. It's the fall in the denominator that is causing all of this to rise, i.e., the debasement is making you poorer.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've talked about this on Twitter and people don't get it. They think I'm being ridiculous. But this is not, you know, when I show those simple charts divided by the balance sheet,
right,
this is not some random chart. This is this whole thread that has got me to understand why this has happened.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time and bit by bit to build on this understanding. So
just to explain that real quick. So you're saying when you denominate the S&P growth in growth of central bank balance sheet or gold, I think you basically see it's flat, right? Or everyone thinks.
Well, so what's interesting, what got me to get to this point? So I understood all of this. And I understood the balance sheet was a function of demographics, and debt was a function of demographics. It was all kind of all part of the same picture. I and everybody else start shouting, it's an everything bubble. How does that work? If it's an everything bubble, why is nobody getting rich apart from the very rich who've got access to capital? I then start thinking, well, I lived through and worked through and invested through 2000, and that was a bubble because equities decoupled from gold, from real estate, from everything, right? And assets have a relative valuation, always have in history. So basically, gold versus real estate is a trade-off everybody will make at a certain point. If real estate is crazy expensive versus gold, at some point, the flow of capital goes the other way because it's an asset. So what's got the higher expected return in the future, right? It's very logical behavior. And equities work the same. They all have this long-term range. The only thing that doesn't, which catches everybody out, is industrial commodities and agricultural commodities. Why? Because technology. You can get more out of the ground.
Right. Yeah.
At cheaper prices, or you grow more bushels of wheat per hectare. So those things get cheaper. So CPI gets cheaper because of technology, computing power, all of this stuff, but the actual assets don't get cheaper. So I looked at all of these and like the S&P versus gold is kind of in line, nothing wild, like one standard deviation expensive for equities, you know, nothing crazy. And real estate the same. So I'm like, what happens if it's something else? What happens if we're just looking at the wrong denominator? And then I thought, well, if the Fed balance sheet is a function of demographics, and it is putting the missing layer in, are they actually debasing the currency? And therefore, if we were to denominate it, basically to discount the dollar by the amount the Fed balance sheet's grown,
right,
would that show us the truth? And suddenly the charts became really bloody logical because everyone kind of feels like you didn't get richer. The average person definitely did not get richer after 2008. And when you look at it, the assets didn't perform in line with the balance sheet. So therefore, they didn't perform in line with the debasement. So the S&P basically just about made up since 2008, not over 2008. We lost that. It's never coming back. Well, it might do, but it'll take another 20 years. And, you know, gold, real estate, none of these really recovered. They just basically follow the balance sheet. So then I thought I'd head check myself on that too, because, you know, everyone was calling me an idiot for saying this. So then I took the UK property prices and divided it by the Bank of England balance sheet, flatline. German property prices, flatline. Swedish property prices, flatline. Canadian property prices, flatline. Australian property prices, flatline. I'm like, wow. Yes, this is it. This is debasement, and debasement makes it look deceptively like the value of the assets is going up.
Right.
It's not. It's the value of the denominator falling. There were two assets that significantly beat the balance sheet and is above 2008. And they're bloody obvious what they are. One is Bitcoin and the other is the NASDAQ.
Mm.
Because technology
Yeah.
and this network effects
age.
business model, the digital age, is relentless and destroying everything in its path.
Mm-hmm.
So all profits accrue. We get that. And that became amazing to me to realize what is now going on. So that 2008 is what gives rise, the final push off the edge of the cliff to populism everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was then Europe had 2012, where Europe almost lost its entire banking system and the whole of Europe and the euro.
Mm-hmm.
It got really scary. And I was living in Spain. I had to buy tinned food and a generator because I thought we might lose power. I mean, Cyprus took all money out of people's bank accounts above $100,000. So if you were a gas station operating on like 2% margins on the gas you pump, they took the $1 million out of your bank account, which is your float to buy the gasoline for each month,
right,
and took it and paid the fucking creditors of the bank. Right. And it was your deposit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you didn't own shares in the bank. How dare you do that?
Mm-hmm.
In Spain, they were converting like grandmother's savings accounts and turning them into preference shares. So you got a high yield.
Wow.
And then guess what? They default on payment of the preference shares and they've got nothing. And they forced them into it. So this was happening en masse in Europe. Jeez. And I'm like, okay, I know where this is going. Occupy Wall Street explodes.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Spain, the indignados, everyone's in the streets rioting. And it's like the people against the state. Because people are angry. They don't know why they're angry. And then what happens after the people become angry phase, it then splits into left and right because they want to blame somebody.
Right.
Because they can't blame themselves because they are to blame. So they blame each other. And the internet comes out of it. And there we are given Facebook. And Facebook is the perfect place to divide everybody. And you throw in the Russians who understand this, and they start using bots to drive apart people who are logically centrists. They could have been left and right, but they could have a discussion over dinner. Now they absolutely hate each other and think it's intolerable. And one's a communist and the other's a fascist. That's where we got to. And that came out of 2008 because people now realize that they were never going anywhere. That social contract, the contract of the government and the people, had failed. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the government could ever have met it. Don't forget, over in Europe, we've got another system issue that we haven't yet faced based on this, is how the hell are we going to pay for the healthcare? It was a lovely idea to give free healthcare, but that's a bill we can't pay when these baby boomers go through death. In the US, you've got the other problem. Everyone is like raging against the health insurance. Why is health insurance high? Because the baby boomers are going into their aging phase where they're becoming ill. So you're drawing on your health benefits. So obviously, it's if you report a robbery at your house, 5 months in a row, guess what? Your house insurance is going up. So it's a function of demographics. And the other one that killed people was the millennials got killed by education costs. I grew up in a world of free education, but they took that all away because the baby boomers have got too much debts. So they couldn't pay for, the governments couldn't pay for all of this anymore. So they force everybody else to pay for their own bloody education at ridiculous rates.
And adding the student loan debt on top of that, which is non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. So it's almost like they took a complete zig from the zag there, with the complete opposite direction from free education to indentured servitude for education.
Yeah. So what you've then done is force up education costs. Education CPI has been falling now for a while because guess what? The 86 million millennials have now left university.
Yeah.
And the Gen Zs are smaller, so it's cheaper, right? It's demographics again. But two other things go on. One is because it makes those companies rich, they start lobbying to protect their monopolies,
Mm-hmm.
which makes people angry. Again, the food lobby, the oil lobby, the healthcare lobby, all of these people have and the financial lobby clearly want to protect their power now because they've made the most money out of this. But around 2010, another catastrophe happens. The baby boomers can't afford to retire. Only the rich can. So they're leaving the labor force participation rate and others are being marginalized. So they're still in the labor force. And now their bloody 86 million kids are. They had too many kids. So now you've got the two largest demographic bulges in all recorded history in the labor force at the same time. And technology is exploding. What do you think is going to happen to society? Do you think this is a smooth thing? No, this is the fourth turning.
Right.
And the fourth turning is the transition of power from one demographic to the other.
Wow.
And that is what we're playing out now. And that is going to be the destruction of the rules-based global order system and a rebuilding from scratch. That is the rise of crypto. That is the rise of blockchain. That is the wholesale change and what is going to come in politics. Maybe not what people want to hear, but it's coming. And you can't almost avoid it.